Hi, I'd like to touch on a few ideas that I think will help as you start the process of drafting your op-ed for major assignment number one. I have a little outline here. I want to talk about the outline that you should consider making. I want to talk about how to build a logical argument, and then I want to talk about how to think about the information rhetorically. So to start, the first point I want to make is that I suggest that everybody take the idea that you've shared with me. And you take that idea and you now have to turn it into a series of claims, right? Or premises. And I have two examples here. One way of thinking about it is this syllogistic framing. And when I gave you the J.T. Gatto piece, this is how we looked at that, right? That we took the entire op-ed and we broke it down into this syllogism that read like this. The American educational system does a disservice to students. I am a part of this system and do not want to do a disservice, therefore I need to quit. And so the idea is that if we could get folks to buy into this first idea and this second one, then they would necessarily follow the reasoning and draw the same conclusion that the author was drawing. Right? So we've got to kind of beef up these 2 points here, and people will make this conclusion. For some of you, you're thinking of it more so in terms of a series of logically related claims. It actually still has this frame in it, but it doesn't necessarily come across so mathematical almost, right? And here's an example from a student paper. If we want healthy, informed citizens who respect each other's consent and know how to prevent unwanted pregnancies and diseases, then sex ed needs to change. Most current sex ed programs do not teach consent and prevention. Rather, they teach outmoded puritanical versions. And so if we look here, we can see that there's a series of claims. And we can see that there's this claim here that they teach outmoded puritanical versions. We see that most current sex ed programs do not teach consent and prevention. And we can see that if that's a problem, then that needs to change. So we do have this kind of series of interrelated claims. So this is the first task, right? Is can you create this? Can I see this? Before you really even get started. And so once you've got this, you then just are filling in the blanks, right? And let me give you a sense of that. Let's take a look at the second point here. Once you have your claims laid out, you now have to think about, from the logical side of the house, what sort of evidence you want to bring in. And for some of you, you're going to be bringing in some outside research. And when I say outside research here, I'm not really talking about academic journals as much as we're thinking of credible magazines or newspaper articles, the sorts of articles that may give us some highlights from recent studies that have been done, those sorts of things. But you can also think about personal examples. You can also think about local examples, right? The sorts of examples that are going to resonate with the audience. And so I'm assuming that you've taken a look at this example that I gave you here, because you'll see that in this example op-ed, the student uses both. If we look toward the middle of the article, when the student is trying to build a case that most current sex ed programs do not teach consent and prevention, we can see that she's brought in research here, here, and here. Right? She talks about, in this little section, a survey by the Alan Guttmacher Institute that talks about how much abstinence education is being done. And then she references that study in this section of the text. So she's bringing in some outside research to provide support for that claim. Yet, if we look here, she writes, now I went to a Catholic school for 13 years. And then she elaborates on that example. And so there's a combination of personal anecdote along with outside research. And that's a real smart way of getting into this. Now I will say, I am not forcing outside research for this, that you, depending on your topic, it's possible that you can write the entire thing with anecdotal support. But I am saying that for some of you, it's probably a smart move to bring in some of that outside research. Finally, I'm asking you guys to think rhetorically. So it's not just a question of building an argument. It's not just a question of providing support for the argument. It's also a question of how you actually frame and present the information. And so if we go back to the example op-ed that the student produced. You can see that there are some moves here in green that I've highlighted that show that the student's really thinking not necessarily only logically, but also rhetorically in the broader sense. And so think about how she establishes credibility when she starts this by saying, I've been a sociology major with a concentration on human sexuality for a while now, right? So she's establishing some sort of expertise, right? Given that this is something she's been studying and is interested in. You can also think about the tone and the language choice she's using when she writes things like, has legally sealed the deal, right? Like this little move right here, this sealed the deal move, right? Is the author actually thinking about the sort of language that might resonate with a college audience? She references the college audience. Of course, obviously, as college students, we are already very aware that the best way to combat any sort of ignorance or extreme idea is to educate. Right? And so there are these moves that are embedded, that are peppered throughout this piece, that demonstrate that she's thinking not just logically, but rhetorically. In fact, if you look where she's decided to put the entire thesis or the entire argument, we see that she puts it at the very end. Right? So she doesn't necessarily throw it on the people at the very beginning because she knows that that could distance some of the readers who may not agree. But by putting it at the end, she allows the readers to start to draw the conclusions that she wants them to get to. And so, in general, as you guys start this piece, I ask you to consider all of these things, right? Think about how you can lay it out. Think about the actual claims you want to support. Think about how you can support those claims. Should you bring in outside research? Can you do the whole thing with just anecdotes? Are people going to buy into it? Are people going to demand outside research? And then you can also think finally about how it will function rhetorically. I hope that this helps as you get underway drafting that op-ed. Take care.